Happy holidays.
Three years ago, he came to power as the most popularly elected county boss in the country, who in a short period of time transformed from a political neophyte with grassroots support from across the divide. Troubled Sonko has since been impeached, with his fate laying with the Senate. The House Speaker Ken Lusaka has already gazetted Wednesday afternoon as the day the House will discuss the impeachment. Tonight on Pundits Night, we speak to Governor Mike Sonko's spokesperson Ben Mulwa, Nairobi County Assembly's Minority Whip Peter Imwatok, former Nairobi Speaker Beatrice Ilachi, and our resident analyst Herman Manyora. Your voice matters, your opinion counts. Be part of this discussion. Send us a message on 22047. The hashtag to use tonight is Pundits Night. Just a reminder of who our guests are. Ben Mulwa is the governor's spokesperson. Beatrice Ilachi is the former Nairobi County Speaker, and Herman Manyora is our resident analyst. The County Minority Whip will be joining us for this discussion, but nonetheless, we start the conversation. And let me start with Ben. Good evening all, and good evening to you, Ben, as well.
A very good evening to you, and how are you?
All right, Ben, 3 years ago, the governor made history as being the most popularly elected governor with over 870,000 votes. A year into it, his deputy resigned. The back and forth and frosty relationship between him and the county assembly coming into play. A year ago, 4 functions transferred from the governor, the county, to the Nairobi Metropolitan Services. If this is not a city in limbo, it is a county in crisis in which your boss oversees.
I wouldn't look at it that way, Abu Bakr. First, we have to agree that the fact that the governor, as you put it, was the most popularly elected leader in this country.
Go ahead, Ben.
The fact that the governor was the most popularly elected leader, not only in Nairobi, but across the country by the highest number of votes in any particular county, was demonstration of the immense faith that the people of Nairobi had in the governor. And the one thing that we have to agree, the last 3 years have not been easy, that is given. The last 3 years have been a combination of many challenges, especially for the governor. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that he has been able to stand up and stand out very strongly for mm-hmm. is to defend the reasons and the interests of the people of Nairobi, and in particularly defend the resources of the people of Nairobi, which have been misused for many years, which have been abused for many years, where we have billionaires who are used and who became billionaires in this city just out of supplying nothing to City Hall. And this has been one of his greatest points of attrition with the entire, the larger infrastructure within Nairobi, be it the political class or be it certain interest groups. This has been a major thorn because Nairobi used to be a gravy train until Governor Sonko landed, and he shut down that and he decided that now it is about the people. It is
then
no
you
longer
talk
about
of interests. We will come to that a little bit later in this discussion. But you say the fact that over 870,000 people voted for him is a show of faith. That faith has not transpired to what the people were hoping, really, is it?
No, it has.
In which way has it?
Yeah, it has. You know, sometimes I listen to people saying that Governor Sonko has done nothing for the last 3 years. And I keep wondering, like the other day I was in a discussion where somebody was saying that in the last 8 months we have seen really what NMS has done. And all Nairobians are talking about our pavements in the CBD. But I keep wondering, like we have 6 new markets in Nairobi since the governor came into office. I wonder how invisible these markets are. We have 3 new fire stations in Nairobi, yet the last one was was constructed in 1907. People are not able to see that. We have new roads that have been done, especially in Eastlands areas that had been neglected for so many years. But people have not been able to see that. We had transformation, especially in healthcare, where Pumwani Maternity Hospital was transformed from the death trap that was, where our mothers used to die and our children disappear. And it was transformed to a world-class facility. But interestingly, people are not able to see that. People are only able to see a few colored cabro works in the CBD, and by that assessment, they consider that the governor has done nothing for the last 3 years. I don't think that is really fair.
All right, let me bring our resident analyst, Herman Manyora, to the discussion. Herman, this is a governor who has been voted more than the president and his then political rival, now a political friend, Raila Odinga, separately. Over 870,000 votes. Trusts, one will suppose, that Kenyans and Nairobians have had in the governor. He is an impeached governor as we speak tonight. Has he failed in your own view?
You know, it will be very difficult to say he has failed or succeeded. To begin where you begin in terms of the number of votes he got, fairly almost like a miracle, quite so many votes beyond what Raila got in Nairobi, like you say, beyond what Uhuru got. Earlier on, he had been elected overwhelmingly as governor, as senator, and much earlier on as MP for Makadara in a by-election. That would tend to suggest that Sonko is a fairly popular person. I think so popular that I would actually be surprised if he could lose in an election in 2022 were he to stand. I mean, if this kind of impeachment thing doesn't go through. So it is true, yes, he's a popular governor. In judging whether he has succeeded or not, one will also need to look at what Nairobi City was before Kidero, what it was in the 4.5 years of Kidero, and then you could then proceed to look at the 2 or so years Sonko had an interrupted reign. And if you are to look at it fairly that way, it will be difficult to run away from the truth that there are things he has done in Nairobi that perhaps even Kidero and the previous people couldn't do.
You fairly talk about the governor being overwhelmingly being elected both as a senator and as a governor. Given that there is a case of an impeachment that the Senate will be making a ruling on, which begs the question, these are thousands of voters who voted for someone they believed in. They still believe, I suppose, in. Should it be fair for a house to sit and forego what these people all wanted and go ahead and impeach the governor?
I hope you are not talking to me because I can't hear. I can only hear you from very far.
All right, let me get to Ben Mulwa, who is with me in studio and who can hear me clearly. Ben, you talk of what the governor has done in as far as services and for the people of Nairobi and the county in general is concerned. Why is it that the president seems to have a different view as you have? And I say this asking by quoting the president, who once said that the Nairobi residents do not care who offers the services, they just want to have those services. They have a challenge in delivery of these services. The head of state sees a challenge. You don't?
First, Abubakar, I would not be in a position to discuss the position held by the president because I don't speak for the president. And I want to believe that the president has his own set of parameters that he would use to come up with such an assessment. And it is the same basis, or it is on the same basis, that I have parameters that I would use to make an assessment to be able to determine whether Governor Sonko has performed well in office or not. And there's something very important that Professor Manyora has mentioned. Governor Sonko had a 2-year uninterrupted tenure at City Hall. And it is through this period that he really transformed a lot of things. One of them was actually to transit Nairobi from a cash payment system to a cashless system where online payments were being done. And this saw to the tremendous improvement of revenue. Contrary to the position that you have just mentioned, since KRA took over revenue collection in Nairobi, our revenue has dipped from the previous year, which was 10.8 billion shillings, to 8.4 billion shillings just the concluded financial year. That tells you that there is a problem. Secondly, the governor, by consolidating resources and ensuring that people are not paying for services at source, ensured that now there were sufficient funds not only to meet the day-to-day obligations of the county, but also to invest in development. And that's one of the reasons you have seen such transformation. It is also very important to note that through the same system of ensuring that resources are consolidated, we were able to ensure that Nairobi, for the first time since Governor Sonko came into office in 2017, employees of the Nairobi County government have never gone on strike because of delayed payment of salaries. This was a monthly routine under the previous regime. And these are achievements that we cannot run away from.
All right.
And the other thing that people also keep asking, and a position that I wish to clarify very quickly, we have to agree that Nairobi is very challenged in terms of the resources that it is allocated. Abubakar, I'll tell you this right now. Like in this financial year, Nairobi has been allocated 15.9 billion shillings. Out of this money, 14 billion shillings goes to the payment of salaries and wages and maintenance of staff. So it is actually very constraining. And by the fact that the governor was able to achieve this much, tells you a lot of prudent mechanisms were put in place in terms of prioritizing what was necessary.
All right, fair enough, Ben. You talk of 2 years that were uninterrupted, which seemingly suggests as though they are years of interruption.
Yes.
Who has interrupted the governor?
Well, you remember by mid-2019, the governor started receiving a lot of negative press. And this was by the fact that, in fact, the main bone of contention for the governor right now is being impeached because he has refused to cede resources that belong to the people of Nairobi through a framework that is not provided for in law. Now, previously, the biggest bone of contention emanated from what we call the pending bills. And allow me a second or two to take you through this. When Governor Sonko came into office, he inherited 64 billion shillings of pending bills. And to him, having been a leader in Nairobi as a member of parliament and a senator, he had a very good understanding that a huge percentage of these pending bills were fraudulent. These are people who are laying claims to City Hall while there is nothing that they had offered to the people of Nairobi. And what he did, you remember in December 2019, it is when the national government requested county governments and other government agencies to form pending bills committees. Governor Sonko formed one back in September 2017. And the reason was he knew that there were bills that were fictitious and the public of Nairobi stood to lose money. Out of that pending bills committee, which was chaired by Professor PLO Lumumba, those bills were drastically reduced from a whole 64 billion shillings to 23 billion shillings, saving the people of Nairobi over 40 billion shillings, which were fictitious. He further subjected the same pending bills to the Auditor General. And these bills were further reduced from 23 billion shillings to 11 billion shillings. And he has been consistently allocating a little resources out of what he receives to service these pending bills and also ensure that service delivery and development.
Ben, let me interrupt you at that point. You paint a very glowing picture of the man whom you speak on his behalf.
It is the reality.
Fair enough, and you have to do that.
Reality.
I asked you the question of who is interrupting the governor.
As I said,
you have not yet answered that.
As I said, I was giving you the genesis. So there are people who are heavily banking on the governor to help them get paid for these fictitious spending bills because that has been their career for a very long time. Maybe some of them have been doing that for the last 30, 40 years. When the governor stood his ground, they had to start hatching a scheme of his downfall. And that's when you started seeing up to the point of the ongoing cases that he's facing in court.
And you say there are people, and you say there are people, these are people who are in government or where are
they? Some of them are in government, some of them are not in government. But I'll not discuss names for the obvious reasons.
But you know them.
I can tell you, if you look at the chronology of what Governor Sonko has been going through since June 2019, you can tell of a very elaborate and a very clear scheme to curtail his ability to perform his functions as a governor, and at the same time painting him black before the eyes of the public, while struggling to bury the reality of the development and the achievements that he has done, so that he can appear as a complete failure. And that is the opposite. Because if you quickly, and Abubakar, I'll challenge you, before the Senate sits on Wednesday, I'll challenge you to look at the report, especially from the Control of Budget and the audit reports for Nairobi. Look at even the report from the EACC. Governor Sonko was able to remove Nairobi Nairobi from the most corrupt top 3 counties back in 2017, up now Nairobi is not even in the top 20, because when wananchi stopped paying for their services directly to the people, when you could just use your M-Pesa and pay for services, it cut down a lot of channels for corruption. So those are facts. Even if the governor goes home, I can assure you history will be able to judge him fairly. And as Professor Manyora has also indicated, ultimately there are realities that we can never erase. That Governor Sonko was the first governor, was the first leader at City Hall since independence to build an extra fire station in this city. We have a population that has grown from hundreds of thousands then to the millions that we are.
Fair enough,
and
Ben. Let me bring Herman to the discussion.
Yes.
Herman, is it a case of witch hunt by the MCAs on the governor, or is there a genuine case to impeach the governor?
Let me, before I look at whether it's genuine or whatever it is, can you hear me, Bakari?
Go ahead, Herman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, you're asking Ben Mulwa, who are people interrupting Sonko and is running around the story. Nairobi is full of cartels. Because of the billions in Nairobi, because Nairobi is not Kakamega or Kiambu or Kirinyaga or some of these small counties. This is a city of resources. So there are cartels. If you are going to be a successful governor in Nairobi, you will have to fight the cartels. And it's not easy. And I'll give you a small example. If it was easy to fight cartels in Nairobi, meanwhile, please fix the echo, it's really disturbing me. If it was easy to fight cartels, all these fellows, all these water vendors with big trucks would not be there 8 months since Badi took over, an army general. If it was easy to fight simple cartels, they include even running toilets in the city, those pay toilets. The people collecting garbage, people manning dumping sites, even the general will have handled it. I can assure you, some of the estates, some areas do not get water because of these water barons. So if cartels were easy to fix in Nairobi, Badi would have fixed some of those issues. So they are difficult, and that's what Mulo ought to be telling you. Secondly, just like any governor in the country, MCAs are always making demands across the country. Ask any governor, they'll tell you MCAs are giving them sleepless nights. Maybe this BBI giving them their own 5%. Maybe it will help a few here and there. But the truth is, across the country, governors are always held ransom by MCAs. I've seen it, including my own county. So it will not surprise me, and indeed it is the case, that Sonko has had his share of trouble from the MCAs. You could call it witch hunt, but it is a reality. And if you look at governors who have been impeached or attempts made to impeach them, if you look at the impeachment critically with a keen eye, you will see most of the issues in Zakutafutilia. See, there will be like 10 or so issues, out of which you can maybe identify 1 or 2 that are substance. The rest are things people are trying to search. So yes, it is true. Like any other governor in the country, Sonko has had his share of trouble from MCAs. And that is obvious, and you can see it in any other country.
All right, Herman, you allude to the question of resources. Ben earlier on also alluded to the question of resources. And let me ask Ben this. Ben, it's not entirely on resources that the governor is being impeached on. The grounds of his impeachment, according to the MCAs who voted for this motion, are 1, gross violation of the constitution or any other law, the County Government Act of 2012, the Public Procurement and Disposal Act 2015, and the Public Finance Management Act of 2012, abuse of office, crime under national law.
You know, Abubakar, one of the key things we have to agree, there is no injustice on this planet worse than somebody being prosecuted for the same issue from different quarters. And one of them that we have to agree, when you say gross violation of the Constitution, that is a very vague statement that is nearly impossible to be able to actually quantify. However, there are laws that govern such areas in terms of when you violate the law. When you talk about misappropriation of funds and flouting the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act and many other areas, I want to tell you this. As we speak today, the governor is constantly and consistently attending court over issues concerning the same issues that have been raised in this particular petition by the MCAs. So what the governor is undergoing right now is a double prosecution, where the MCAs appear to somehow be impatient with the court process, yet the governor, like for the last 3 months, has been attending court every day from Monday to Friday, morning to evening. And his position is that he has the right not only to defend himself, but also to clear his name, because most of these allegations are largely unfounded. So for the same MCS to initiate a parallel prosecution over the same issues that are before a competent court of law, in my view, and by any legal standards, is abuse of the judicial system in this country. And actually, it is my hope that the Senate, which has fashioned itself all over the time, is really not only a custodian of devolution, but also a respecter of the rule of law, will rise above the pettiness that we saw in the County Assembly of Nairobi and look through the facts critically, analyze the issues that have been presented itself, and dismiss these issues with the speed that they deserve. Because the governor is yet to be pronounced to be guilty by any court of law. And this has been ongoing. If the case had been stalled, for example, in court, it would have been requisite maybe for the MCS to take this initiative. So clearly it is an issue that is driven by vendetta. It is an issue that is not driven by the need or the need to see the people of Nairobi benefit better. Right now we are talking about a budget which they have actually accused the governor of refusing to sign that budget. And as we speak today a competent court of law suspended the same budget because the governor raised illegalities in his memorandum to the assembly which were ignored. And really, if they cannot come here and start accusing the governor of disregarding the law while at the same time breaking the same laws or disregarding the same laws in the name of fighting the narrow interest that they are pursuing. But Ben, the governor was actually impeached while there was a valid court order stopping the proceedings of that county assembly. So this is double standards that we should not tolerate.
Ben, let me ask you this. You say these are vague grounds of impeachment. The MCAs are quoting acts of the Kenyan constitution and the law. You went ahead to say, and I quote, that it is unfortunate because the MCAs cannot be accusing the governor of illegalities, yet go ahead to commit an illegality in an effort to cure illegality. Where do you see illegality, Ben?
No, that's why I say, you see, that's why I say they're accusations, because all the things that they have said are accusations. They are not things that they have either verified or they are not things that they have confirmed. They have alleged that the governor has breached this law and all that. When you talk about even the procurement laws, there is no governor in this country actually who is a procurement, who is an accounting officer of any county. But because, as I indicated to you, there are narrow interests. And I want to give you this scenario for the public to get this right. As we speak today, we have pending bills to the tune of about 4 or 5 billion shillings that Nairobi is due to pay. And some of these MCAs have been on the front line pushing for the payment of some of these fraudulent bills. So their idea is, if they get Governor Sonko out of the way, it makes it easier for them to get these payments done very quickly so that they can raise campaign money for 2022. We have to reach a point where we are honest with the people of Nairobi and agree that the one thing that Governor Sonko will go down in history as having achieved was to jealously and ferociously protect the resources of the people of Nairobi. From the people who are salivating, now they are frustrated, so they consider that the easiest way is just to initiate all these frivolous allegations they have against him with the hope that they can get him out of office. All right,
and now that we are talking of MCAs, the members of the county assemblies and the assembly specifically in Nairobi, Herman, there is a dispute on how the number and what the number of the MCAs who voted for and against this motion is. The governor on his Twitter account said that over 70 Nairobi City County MCAs have filed a complaint with police on impersonation of their email by rogue assembly officials. The assembly officials say a total of 88 MCAs have voted for this motion. Clearly, it's more than a game of numbers.
I cannot say with any certainty whether that is true or not. Whether there were fake votes or not, I can't say that. But I can tell you this. Impeachment in this country is a political process. We saw in Kiambu they were saying there was a problem with the numbers. Senate ignored that. And my friend Babaya was impeached. There are issues about Kirinyaga that would have made people believe Anne Waiguru was going to be impeached. I mean, she was impeached, but actually voted to go home by Senate. That didn't happen. Impeachment, like any other place, even you saw in America, really. You want to tell me all those senators who served Trump in the U.S. Senate believed that Trump was 100% innocent? No. It is, they were standing with him as a Republican president, and impeachment is always a political process. That's why very few of them ever succeed anywhere in the world. And in our case, I have said this before, if you look at the charges, you will always have a problem seeing anything that can stand anywhere where it's a serious scrutiny, whether be it in a court or even just serious Kenyans looking at what is it you're accusing Anne Waiguru of doing. If you go through that, you can see in vitu ya kutafutia. She took impressed, she used to go out, she didn't go, the passport is vague and what. And you know, very frivolous things. So it's true that maybe there was something tinkering with the numbers so that Sonko has to go. Maybe it is not true. That I don't know. What I know is, like I've said, this is a political process, but I must be allowed to say this, Abubakar. Let us not play with the law. Let us not play with our constitution and its provisions and the constitutionalism. This is a young constitution. Devolution is a young thing. The culture is now developing. Let us put in place processes that will show we respect our constitution and our laws. If the court pronounces itself, and I'm hesitant to allow courts to interfere with the political processes. I don't like it. But for whatever reason, if they have done, let's look at it critical. Let's try to obey our laws. Now, when it comes to whether or not the numbers were there, I think it's not a very difficult thing to ascertain, honestly. What is DCI doing? Are you telling me the men on Kiambu Road cannot decipher that, cannot tell us these were fictitious votes? If somebody hacked in somebody's email, are you telling me we need FBI to come and do that for us? We don't have what it takes to do that. And that's why I'm saying a culture is now forming. We have started devolution. We have a new constitution. What we do today will live for generations. If we are in a hurry to remove Sonko, I think we should find more civil ways of doing it. You get it? Because even when I looked at Babayao, there were issues that were, you could see the hurry. I know there were bad things he did, one or two here, from what I was seeing. But when we want to remove a governor, let us be civil about it. Because what we do today will be felt many years to come. And I have this finally to say, Abubakar. What you do in the city of Nairobi will not be forgotten in a year the way people have forgotten about Kiambu and Kirinyaga. No. What happens in Nairobi here will be felt for generations to come, for many years to come. And when the people talk about devolution and how we messed our devolution, or how we built it, how we nurtured our devolution, they will be referring to what happens in Nairobi. So we must be very careful with what we do in Nairobi. Yeah.
Ben, still on the number and the numbers of the MCAs who voted or otherwise on this motion, it's 88. The governor disputes that.
Of course.
On what basis?
You know, the most amazing thing is that while the vote was actually ongoing inside the County Assembly of Nairobi, the governor was live, not only on his Facebook, but he had media representatives from all the media stations. I want to believe I also saw your camera there. And these MCAs were physically there without their phones, 57 of them. Then as they are sitting there, you could see from the assembly dashboard that the same MCAs who are sitting in Kwale with the governor are actually online in the assembly Zoom platform and actually voting. I mean, we can have interesting levels of impunity in this country, but you know, some of these things are very unfortunate.
And Ben, in the era of technology, you don't believe that someone else, with their consent, would have logged into those systems to vote for this motion?
They have already, the same MCAs as we are speaking now, have already filed a petition in the High Court suing the Speaker.
But there is a logical possibility that it was there.
They have already, just a moment, they have already sworn affidavits and they have filed a petition in the High Court suing the Speaker and the clerk for fraudulently using their usernames or their login details to participate in a vote that they were not willing to participate in. Those numbers were fraudulent, and there's something very important that Professor Manyora has just mentioned. You see, today people may be doing these kinds of impunity thinking it is about Sonko or it is about punishing the governor. But I can assure you, we are setting a very ugly precedent as a country going forward where all manner of impunity, all manner of illegalities will be committed and people will be here cheering on. Just the same way Governor Sonko came into office in 2017. He's not going to be a governor perpetually. One day, one time he will leave, even if it is through this impeachment. But what standards are we setting around our democracy? Here we are running around the country talking about BBI and bringing this country together and all these fancy things. The question is, where does the rule of law stand in this? If MCAs can, you remember, and I wanted Imwatok to be here, a day just before the impeachment motion came, that was on Wednesday, he was on TV stating categorically that regardless of the presence of a court order, they are going to proceed with that impeachment motion. This is somebody who is elected and who is a constitutional office holder who does not believe in the rule of law. So you may look at it, we may narrow down to the pettiness that they have made it. It is just about Governor Sonko. But we have to look at the broader scope of things. What kind of a precedent are we setting whereby MCAs now have the audacity to disrespect court orders and proceed to discuss a motion that they have been barred from discussing and even alleged to come up with a resolution, and with the same impunity even forward the same to the Senate. That's why the whole world now is watching the Senate. And as I stated from the outset, I want to believe the Senate has already set a very good standard in terms of respecting the rule of law. I want to believe that the Senate will be able to see the illegalities and the abnormalities that have been committed along the process and stand by what is right. The governor, you don't have to like Governor Sonko's face, you don't have to like the way he walks or the way he dresses or anything. But I think it is important as a country, if we are really genuine in insisting on moving forward, to rise to a point whereby the rule of law becomes the bare minimum around which we want to build our future. Let us not be talking about the law like the same way I was telling you that they broke the law. They cannot be on TV insisting that they are going to disobey a court order and at the same time they are accusing the governor of breaking a law. I mean, that's double standards of the worst format.
All right,
so we really have to agree. The foundation of our country is a constitution and the law. And even this argument that the governor has refused to give money to the NMS is all anchored around the governor has been consistently saying since March that there is no framework that allows a county government to finance the operations of the national government, and in this case, the office of the president.
But Ben, it's not a perception. The governor failed to approve the 37.4 billion shillings budget to facilitate the operations of the Nairobi Metropolitan
It is an illegal budget
Services.
it is an illegal budget which has been suspended today by a court of law. Secondly, when you read the deed of transfer, it specifically talks about the national government and the county government shall agree on the financing of the transferred functions. What we witnessed here is a case whereby the chairman of the budget committee, after taking the county government through the regular process of developing a budget, up to and including going for a retreat where he spent taxpayers' money, they came up with a budget which was balanced, which ensured that the transferred functions are well funded and also the retained functions are well funded. Then on that afternoon, Mbatia came with a budget that nobody even knows who authored it, presented it before the assembly. It was quickly passed and it was brought to the governor for his signature. When he read it, and according to section 24 of the County Governments Act, he returned the same budget with a memorandum, just the same way it is provided for in law. Then they overturned they purported to overturn or to refuse to acknowledge the governor's memorandum. A same scenario we witnessed under Elachi. That is why I wanted her to be here on the show as well.
She had promised, and we are still hoping she will join us in this discussion.
And unfortunately, as we speak, that they quickly rushed also to gazette the same Appropriation Act. That is why the Court of Law has today suspended the same. That tells you, Abubakar, as you may insist, we have to agree that there is a problem. And as much as there are so many people who may dislike Governor Sonko the person, we really must be able to do what is right for the people of Nairobi in the long run.
And
Ben, this must be anchored in the rule of law.
All right, and you have insisted on the rule of law. And let me get to Herman. Herman, there are those who believe, if not a perception at its best, that there are some forces who want Sonko out, and to them it's not hidden. And to them, this getting to the Senate is just for purposes of formality.
I said impeachment since we got this devolution has been a political process. Indeed, it is everywhere in the world, but in our case, in even crude ways. That's why I talked about civility. If you want to remove somebody, do it in a civil way, because these things are on record. These things are precedent setting. They will haunt us. They will disturb us 30, 40 years down the line. And our children and grandchildren will be wondering, how could our grandparents and fathers run the country in the manner in which they were running the country? And then this becomes precedent, sometimes very hard to undo. So you see, you could say that somebody has already decided. But then I would wonder, wasn't it very easy to remove Sonko right from the time Badi was coming in? Was it very difficult under the law? It was very easy under the law. I also remember very well, MCS, now they are making noise. They were called State House. They ended the impeachment. Many people thought to end that agony, mercy killing, was to allow them, was for the MCS to impeach him. This thing would have ended that. It would have been very simple. They didn't dissolve the county assembly, Nairobi County. They had the power to. If it's government doing this, I think that's very bad, because MCS wanted to impeach Sonko. They were called at State House in broad daylight. They were told, don't, we are going to work with him. Now, these few months down the line, they are at it again. And when you do things in that manner, then you do it in a crude way. So yes, like you are saying, Senate could be a mere formality. But I will have this to say to Senate. Yes, it could be a mere formality. But remember, what Senate does today will have far-reaching implications in terms of devolution. What Senate does today about this thing will be felt many generations to come, I've said. Some of the things you do cannot very easily be undone. So I will ask Senate, if they listen, look at this thing critically. If indeed it is true, there's a possibility signatures or whatever was forged, people hacked into people's email and what have you. Can Senate order an inquiry into this? They will have time. The law allows them to do this within a certain time. So long as they have taken over the case, I think they have sufficient time. Let them not be in a hurry to prosecute this issue. Let them not process this impeachment in a hurry. Because if they do so, they will never convince anybody in this country that they are defenders of devolution. And indeed, some of the problems Sonko and Badi are facing, politics aside, are issues of the absence of an infrastructure to be used in situations such as this. The structures. Why has Senate not moved with speed to come up with the legislation to guide how this thing will work when national government takes over. Because there's so much confusion. You ask Sonko to give money, he looks around, he doesn't see the provisions. He sees he's violating the Public Finance Management Act. He doesn't see the law. He doesn't see an opening. So it's like you are being told, get county money and give somebody, an entity. Senate would have moved fast to create legislation that will then make it very difficult for Sonko to hold onto funds he's supposed to pass over to General Body and NMS. So I am challenging Senate. Do not be in a hurry to process this case. So long as you are within legal timelines, take your time. Process this thing keenly. Look at the issue of the hacking into, if it is true. It's a very simple thing you can establish. I know also, Ben Mulwa, you must also know, it is possible I could be sitting there as an MCA with Sonko, with my phone away, but I've given my son my password. You could give somebody your password to enter your email and vote for you. So you see, all these things are possible, but then they have to establish them beyond reasonable doubt. Because not to do so, if you hurry this thing, I'm telling Senate, Abubakar, I'm telling Senate, Nairobi is not Kirinyaga. Nairobi is not Embu. Nairobi is not Kiambu. This is Nairobi. This is Kenya. This is the heart of Kenya. What happens, and that's why I'm also telling the president, what happens in Nairobi, people will be talking about in New York, in Japan, Tokyo. They will be saying, how foolish can these Kenyans be? So whatever we do, if we must impeach Sonko, do so.
All right, Chairman.
By all means. But make sure you do not leave Nairobi with that. Make sure you do not leave devolution stuck somewhere.
All right, Chairman, point made.
And make sure you do it in a civil way, yeah.
All right, Chairman. You as the viewer, your opinion counts, your voice matters. Keep talking to us. The hashtag to use on Twitter is Pundits Night. Send us a message on 22047. Let me sample some of your views. Josephat Odongo on Facebook says Sonko's goose is cooked, period. Lydia on Facebook says don't impeach Sonko, he was elected by the people. All right, let me get to Twitter as well. Remember the hashtag to use on Twitter is Pundits Night. Kipkorir Langat says there is no need to impeach Sonko. The people of Nairobi elected him. That is Kipkorir. Constant Cup on Twitter says conflict of interest emerges between functions as the national government feels that their cake is being eaten. The concern over the success of a local government is a primate city is also a political threat. Brian Kosgei on Twitter says they won at least for now, but Governor Sonko will bounce back. Your opinion matters. Keep talking to us. We'll be sampling some of your views. Let me get back to Ben. Ben, this leaves at a welcoming note the Senate to now pick up this. And the Speaker has gazetted Wednesday for the discussion and the deliberation of this. First, does the Governor, whom you speak on his behalf, have confidence in the Senate, Kenya's upper house?
First, Abubakar, as I indicated from the outset of this discussion, Governor Sonko has 100% confidence in the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. For a simple reason. For the last 7 years, the Senate has continued to position itself and fashion itself as a house of dignity, a house that is beyond unnecessary manipulation, and a house that is willing to go the whole hog to defend devolution and ensure that the rule of law is observed. We saw this in the very hostile debate surrounding the Division of Revenue Bill, and eventually the people of Kenya won. And the governor believes that beyond the emotions and beyond the personal vendetta that some of the MCAs who are behind his impeachment motion brought to the floor of the House, he is confident that senators will be able to critically now look through this issue based on the issues that have been presented to them versus the facts that are available, and make a decision that is going not only to ensure justice for the people of Nairobi, but most importantly, ensure that the dignity of the Senate is maintained and retained. At this hour, and as Professor Manyora has indicated, Nairobi is not just any of the village, one of the villages in this country where a calamity can actually occur and it doesn't have any implication. We have to agree that Nairobi is the engine of this country. And anything to do with Nairobi must also be done in a manner that is not going to destabilize this country in one way or the other. As we are looking at the scenarios, for example, if the Senate upholds his impeachment, we are looking at a by-election in the next 60 days. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and we are in the middle of this BBA campaigns and all that. And we are just about a year and a half to another election. You can imagine the chaos that is likely going to be emanating from such a scenario, and also the disorganization and the destabilization. That's why the governor believes the Senate is going to rise above the petty politics that we were treated to in the county assembly, look at everything objectively, and render a verdict that is not only going to ensure justice for the people of Nairobi, but most importantly, for the posterity of devolution and for the posterity of the dignity of the house, the upper house, which is the Senate.
Ben, you talk of petty politics at the county. The Senate is a house that has equally been under sharp criticism on their decision and decisions when it comes to impeachment, which begs the question that I still asked on the independence and the confidence that the governor has.
No, as I indicated, actually, if you critically look through the decisions that the Senate has made so far, and the Senate was even in the front line in insisting on raising the bar in terms of the threshold for impeaching a governor. Because around 2013, 2014, it was actually easier to remove a governor from office than to remove an MCA. And unfortunately, that is the reality. Yet, we have a senior state officer who has been given a mandate by a whole county and who is responsible for more, or who is in charge of more responsibility by far than the MCA. And that's why the objectivity of the Senate comes to the fore. The governor has confidence, there is no doubt about that. There are perceptions, as you said, but those do not deter the governor. And having been a former senator as well, he understands the workings of the Senate and the strict adherence to which the Senate has insisted on maintaining the rule of law, and is confident that justice will ultimately be done. Not the mob lynching that we saw in the county assembly, where even fictitious or fake Zoom accounts were being used to vote. For example, very quickly, Abubakar. For example, even the use of Zoom has not been gazetted as a mode of voting. That's why you find, even as we speak today, even in the National Assembly or even in the Senate, this is not one of the modes, especially on critical issues like impeaching a governor. So it is strange that the Nairobi County Assembly would resort, and you remember when the Speaker was making the ruling, that even the members who were physically sitting in the chambers were required now to log into their phones and start voting. It tells you that there was mischief planned all through, and now that is water under the bridge. There are competent institutions to deal with that. And the governor would also expect the Senate to investigate those allegations, because we can't have a scenario going forward whereby county assemblies now will be just sitting. Somebody, actually a clerk of the county assembly, can sit, log in 100 phones at the same time, then vote whichever way they want and get away with it. I mean, that is criminality of the worst order. So those are pertinent issues that must be addressed. And that's why he believes the Senate will be able to rise above those kinds of things, to be able to set a precedent that this country can be able to borrow from.
Fair enough, Ben. All right, Herman, the governor and the president for the longest time have had a very public, cordial relationship, to the extremes of the governor writing in support of the president when he was facing a case at the International Criminal Court that he was innocent, writing the president's name on his head and his hairstyle. Moving on, that has gotten to a place where the governor has described the president as, quote, Nairobi's super senator. How much of this fallout between the duo is to be pointed at in reference to the impeachment?
You know, Abubakar, politicians are just like thieves. There is no honor among thieves. And the politicians have no shame. At one point, you are the best of buddies, and when it serves somebody's interest, they forget about you. As Moi was facing his worst time in politics, I think in 1990, 91 and thereabouts, I read something in some magazine in the UK, which said one of the reasons why Moi was going to succeed this wave, hata Moi mwenyewe asema wakati wa upepo mkali wa 1990-91. That paper, I can't remember what it was. It said, is it Africa Confidential or something? It said one of the characteristics of Moi that would make him go through the multi-party wave was his ability to be very close to you like Njonjo or anybody else, and after 3 steps leaves you falling down and he doesn't even look behind. It is a typical thing with the politicians. So you talk about Ruto and Uhuru, and now you are talking about Uhuru and Sonko. It is typical. But before I say that, let me add something on what Ben Mulwa is saying. The issue of people voting using Zoom and other digital gadgets. Abubakar, in this country, our courts got to a point they could not stop any further. I mean, could not really resist admitting digital evidence, videos and so on. But if you look at what they put in place, what do you have to do so that a video may be admitted in court? It's not like you just walk in a court of law and show a video or a photograph or something like that. There's a whole set of things you must do for that digital evidence to be admissible in court. And I think this is what Ben Mulwa is alluding to. Going forward, and I think Senate must begin now as a process and prosecute this Sonko case. They must look into the issue because like Ben says, and I want to agree with him, if we allow this thing to go on, it's a question of Zoom or just a phone, then we could land ourselves into problems. You see? Mm-hmm. I think we need to be very careful about that. Yeah.
All right. Ben, you also point out to the question of digital voting, the use of technology, which is not part of the standing orders. And you feel that is an illegality?
It is, of course, an illegality because, you see, this is not a marketplace. This is not a merry-go-round. You see, when a group of women or men in a local chama seat, they can decide either to vote by raising their hands. Back in the KANU days, we used to have the Mlolongo system and many other funny ways of doing things. Mm-hmm. But now, as a country that is anchored on the rule of law, we have clear sets of laws and policies in terms of how certain things should be done. The standing orders of the county assembly were not developed in vain, and it took a very lengthy process actually to arrive at that. So it is important that as we pursue to convict other people of committing illegalities, we are
but
not
these are
committing
MCAs, Ben, who are consenting
yes.
to voting in this direction.
That really does not matter. It's like today, are you telling me that, you see, like there is the gazetted chambers where the National Assembly sits. And if they are to do a sitting outside that framework, if they were to sit at Konza City or any other place, then a different gazettement must be done. So are you telling me that members of the National Assembly today can congregate maybe at KICC and purport to have passed a bill or a law? That is not the case. So we must be able to really rise above and focus on the rule of law. Because as a country, and as I've stated before, we are setting a very dangerous precedent whereby one half of a people may find it convenient to disobey laws or even disobey court orders because at that particular point they favor them, at the expense of another half of the population. Right. In the long run, that is actually a recipe for anarchy. And that is a recipe for chaos. And we must never allow ourselves to go that direction as a country.
All right, Ben, one question from Saladnik on Twitter. He asks, if Sonko was a good person, how long did it take him to appoint the deputy governor?
That is a very straightforward question that we need, I can spend 2 seconds to respond.
Go ahead. First
is when Polycarp resigned in January 2018, there did not exist any law in this country that provided for the nomination of a deputy governor. That's a fact you can verify. And when he appeared before the Senate in May 2018, the same year, the devolution committee, that time I think it was chaired by the former majority leader, he made it clear, and the Senate was in agreement, and that's why the Senate came up with a legal framework facilitating the same. And on January 6th this year, the governor nominated a deputy governor by the name Anne Kananu Mwenda. A resident of Nairobi by the name Peter Amagoro or Peter Odhiambo went to court challenging that nomination. As we are speaking today, the matter is still before court. The last hearing was on the 29th of October. A new hearing date has not been set. So we are in a limbo a whole year because there is a court matter. And the governor respects the law. The governor will never disobey a court order in his entire life. And that's why he has been waiting for the determination of that matter. Or if there is any other avenue that the Senate can provide, how he can appoint another or nominate another person, then he will be happy to do the same. But the governor is very categorical that people must really respect the rule of law.
All right, Ben, and because of the interest of time, we will have to end the show there. But before I do that, let me go through some of the feedback that is coming in. Jasmine Otachi says, we woke up early to vote. Don't dare try your dirty politics in the city. Dan Owiti says, what are we to wait about the Senate? But I want to tell Senate that let them not leave people of Nairobi in darkness. May God bless you all. I hope, Dan, that we are included in that all. Victor Kiplagat says it is illegal for non-MCAs to vote. Geoffrey Komu says watching from Utawala. Dennis Mutiso actually has some kind words for you, Ben. He says, good job, Ben. Someone else on Twitter, Kapti Randich on Twitter says, petty politics can be very oppressive. Blindfold, can we have civility in the honorable members? Well, that's where we'll have to end tonight's edition of Pundits Night. I am Abu Bakr Abdullahi on behalf of the entire team that made this production possible. Bye for now. Enjoy the rest of our programs.